Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most innovative founders and VCs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about AI, but not in the way you expect. It's taken me over a year to write the script for this episode, and like so many of my solo episodes, I originally planned on it being very different from how it turned out. But sometimes these scripts take on a life of their own, and I have to follow it to what always ends up being a far more interesting place. Those episodes also tend to be my most popular. So, today I am going to give creatives a solid 3-point plan to beat AI in the marketplace. I'm going to explain how musicians, podcasters, authors, and other artists can survive and even thrive amidst the unstoppable flood of AI-generated slop that we are all forced to wade through for the foreseeable future. And artists, don't kid yourself. Generative AI is here to stay. There's no going back. But there is a way forward. Now, this is a very personal topic for me. I used to be a professional musician, and I put myself through college playing music in bars and clubs. I was Japan's first professional podcaster back in 2016. And I also love generative AI, and I'm excited about the amazing creative potential it promises. I want to see all of these things thrive. Of course, AI will be fine. It's already supported with practically unlimited funds and by lawmakers and industry leaders around the world. The artists, however, I think they could use a little help. So let's give them a winning game plan. First, we need to understand exactly what it is that AI creates. Can AI create real art? Well, we'll get to that, but that's actually the wrong question to be asking right now. For artists who need to put food on the table, the important question is, what artistic needs does AI meet in the modern capitalist world in which we all live? Okay, with those parameters, what exactly does AI create? Since I can safely assume that we are all familiar with podcasts, let's use podcasting as an example. Google's Notebook LM has the impressive ability to take any textual input, your website's FAQs, a press release, last quarter's sales reports, whatever, and create a convincing podcast from that input. A male and female voice will smoothly and professionally banter about the topic and tease the listener about how they won't believe what's coming up and express broadcast caliber levels of surprise and admiration over the most trivial bits of information. And it's really good. And yet, there's nothing really inside. After a minute or two, it's just not that interesting to listen to, even when the input information itself was interesting. This is because Notebook LM is incredibly good at imitating the structure and affect of a quality podcast. And this is exactly how all LLMs generate art, music, text, and video. They imitate a particular structure and affect, but the quality of the content is largely irrelevant. And just so we're all on the same page here, structure and affect are the logical and emotional cues that let us define a work as a particular type of art. The structure is the logical parameters. A pop song should be about 3 minutes long. It should have an identifiable melody. An image should be rectangular. An email should start with a greeting and end with a signature. That kind of thing. The affect is the emotional parameters. It's the kind of emotional reaction we have to a given work. It's the vibe. A rock version and a country version of the same song will have a different affect. They will feel different. And if you examine where generative AI is successful today, it is in those areas where structure and affect are important, but quality is irrelevant. Now, when I say quality is irrelevant, that's not an insult or some backhanded way of saying that the quality is poor. The key fact is that AI-generated art, whether it is high quality or low quality, excels in situations where quality is irrelevant, and human-generated art, whether it is of high quality or low quality, excels in situations where quality is relevant. If you're an artist arguing about the quality of AI-generated art, you are having the wrong conversation. Now, since your future artistic income depends on leveraging this idea, let's take a closer look at how we humans interact with art, whether it's generated by humans or machines. AI music startups like Suno and Udio have announced that they have created hundreds of thousands of top 40 quality songs that have vocals and full orchestration. It's impressive for sure. But if you were to ask them, okay, pick the best 2 or 3 and let's listen to them together, it would be an utterly bizarre request. Quality is irrelevant. There is no best. When Suno says they create top 40 quality songs, they mean they can reliably produce the structure and affect of a top 40 song. All of the songs can quite plausibly pass for a real song. The quality of any one individual song is irrelevant. The quality is not necessarily bad, it's just irrelevant. Now let's consider a human counterexample. Let's say that your friend, your daughter, maybe your nephew has just put together their first garage band. They play their 3 best songs for you, and they ask what you think. You are not going to respond in terms of structure and affect. You're not going to say, wow, that sounds like a real song. I couldn't even tell it was written by you. I mean, that response would be so odd it would not even be insulting. No, you're going to talk about their music in terms of quality. Man, those lyrics are really clever. That second song had a great groove. You know, maybe you don't really need a 2-minute drum solo. It's not that the quality is good. It's their first band. They're probably terrible. It's that we interact with human-generated art in terms of quality, with structure and affect kind of assumed. The real problem that artists face today is that almost all commercial uses of art focus solely on structure and affect, with quality being irrelevant. As tempting as it is to blame technology, AI did not create this rift between structure and affect on one hand and quality on the other. AI is taking advantage of a culture-wide shift in how we engage with art that has been growing for the last 25 years. And unless artists stand up for themselves and change course, it's going to get much, much worse. It's important to understand that we all used to experience music in a completely different way than we do today. As a kid growing up in the 80s, if you wanted to listen to a particular song, you had to go buy the record. In addition to the friction of going to a physical store, albums cost about $10 and CDs around $15. In today's dollars, that's $29 for a record and $44 for a CD. And for a student, that's about the price of a 6-month subscription to Spotify Premium for a single album. Now, I'm not saying that was a better system. It was terrible in so many ways. However, it had the effect of forcing us to interact with music in terms of quality. After making such a major investment, you didn't just put the album on a shelf. You read the liner notes, you listened to every track multiple times, and then you got together with your friends and you listened to these albums together. You would each play your favorite tracks from the album you brought over, say what you liked about it, and everyone would talk about the music, and about all kinds of other stuff too. This dynamic forced you to engage in terms of quality. Nobody cared how many albums you had. They cared about what you brought that day, and the specific things you liked or disliked about it. Listen to what he's doing in that guitar part. Man, the vocals in the second chorus are amazing. I think he screwed up the bass part there. Every kid in the country was a music critic. Quality mattered. I'm not saying that the music was any better quality, but rather that the engagement with the music focused on quality. Now, some of my Gen Z friends have told me that they would consider this situation horrifying. Why would I want to sit around and be forced to listen to other people's bad music and have to make some kind of presentation about why I like the music I like? Why not just let everyone listen to the music they enjoy? And yeah, I get that. I totally agree that being immersed in music in your headphones is pretty awesome too. Those music sharing sessions could get annoying sometimes. You certainly had to sit through some occasional bad music, and there was always that one jerk who would jump up and say, "Oh man, we have to hear that guitar solo one more time." And yeah, I admit, I was that jerk on quite a few occasions. So, to my millennial and Gen Z listeners, I am absolutely not saying that this was a better way to listen to music. I mean, I might get nostalgic about it, but I certainly don't listen to music this way anymore. Although, now that I think about it, maybe I should. The point is that these constraints, as annoying as they could be, forced previous generations to engage with music very differently. They forced you to consider and to commit and engage with music in terms of quality. That's why every boomer, Gen X kid, and all but the youngest millennials will longingly tell you about the first album they ever bought with their own money. Kansas, point of no return, by the way. Now, things began to change in the early 2000s. It's tempting to blame the streaming services and the superabundance of music they brought with them for this. But the change is deeper and much more pervasive. Around the same time, structure and affect started to get locked down across all mainstream culture, from music to books to movies. And this lock-in is what set the stage for AI dominance of culture. This lock-in of structure and affect has nothing to do with AI. If you listen to the Spotify Top 10, maybe a third of the songs sound like they could have been released in the 80s or 90s. And this is unprecedented. The hits from the 80s sound nothing like the hits from the 40s. The hits from the 70s sound nothing like music from the 30s. Since the beginning of recorded music, every decade of popular music had a unique feel, a unique vibe, a unique affect. Until now. And just as an aside, I feel kind of cheated here. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, I was really looking forward to listening to popular music 30 or 40 years in the future that I would hate just as much as my dad hated the dead Kennedys, which was a lot. I tried to imagine what it would be like and even tried unsuccessfully to create it. But, I never got to hear it. Today's popular music is not lacking in quality. Taylor Swift is fine. Billie Eilish is amazing. But my dad would have liked Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish. Sometimes I want to be challenged. But for whatever reason, after a solid 100-year run, challenging listeners with new music is simply no longer profitable. And, at least for the moment, most listeners seem perfectly fine with that. Spotify's been criticized for steering listeners away from human artists and towards AI-generated songs. That's unfortunate, but the business and engagement models of streaming services makes this inevitable. It's going to get worse, so prepare for it. Spotify is actually a perfect example of how engagement with music has changed from one focused on quality to one focused on structure and affect. In fact, Spotify is not really about music at all. Spotify is about playlists. Playlists are the primary means by which users interact with a platform. Advertisers reach users, and users interact with each other. I would wager that many popular playlist curators don't even bother to listen to all of the songs on their playlists. And why should they? I mean, who has that kind of time? Listening to a song takes 2 or 3 minutes. In that time, you could have a user engage with 10 different playlists and 3 different ads. Hell, you can put together and share a whole new playlist in the time it takes to listen to 2 songs. As a former professional musician, do I find this depressing? Well, yes. Yes, I do. But I find almost all aspects of the music industry depressing, so I can't really blame AI for that. Of course, this shift towards structure and affect is culture-wide. Most nonfiction books published today have the structure and affect of a book, but they're not primarily intended to be read. Today's books tend to be a way of obtaining media exposure a book tour can bring, or as a way to establish the author as an authority on a topic. For the most part, books, like music, have become content. Television news has the structure and affect of a trusted news source from 50 years ago, but discussions of journalistic quality are restricted to occasional hand-wringing segments, while the primary mission is creating news content. Unsurprisingly, AI is already widely used in producing financial and sports news. Social media copies the structure and affect of a community, people asking questions, sharing information and ideas, but ignores the quality of those interactions to focus on engagement metrics. And of course, social media is already starting to be overwhelmed by AI. So you see, the reason so much writing, podcasting, and music is vulnerable to being replaced by AI is that quality had already become secondary. Structure and affect are the primary lens through which we view most creative works, and AI is incredibly good at copying the structure and affect of almost any kind of artistic creation. It's no wonder the culture industry is so excited about the potential of AI. So let's talk about the game plan. As an artist, what exactly are you supposed to do about all this? How do you earn a living in an AI-dominated, content-focused world? Well, I've got a 3-point plan that should put you on the right track. It won't be easy, but, hey, making a living from your art has never been easy. And I'll admit that maybe I'm not the ideal person to be giving advice on how to become a successful artist. My music careers in both Tokyo and LA were not exactly chart-topping successes. I was Japan's first professional podcaster back in 2016, but I dropped the commercial side of podcasting when I saw which way the content winds were blowing. But I do know how to bring new technology to market. I've evaluated hundreds of business models, have been deeply involved with dozens of product launches and technology go-to-market plans, so I can tell you exactly what AI is going to try to take away from you and what it won't be able to. And since no one else seems to be stepping up to the plate, let me give you the best strategy I can. This is the way forward. First, never produce content. Learn to recognize when people are pushed to engage with structure and affect rather than quality, and don't let feedback from those places guide you. Anytime the word content is used to describe artistic expression, it's a strong signal that structure and affect are primary. If your art is supported by advertising that you're not selling directly, then you're creating content. Or worse, you're simply creating training data for AI. Quality is irrelevant, and you will eventually find yourself in a losing battle with AI. This is not to say that there are not extremely high-quality podcasts or YouTube channels. Of course there are. Tons of them. The point is that quality is irrelevant to those platforms themselves. The goal is creating whatever content has the proper structure and affect to sell as many ads or subscriptions as possible. If quality does that, that's fine. If something else can do it cheaper, well, that's even better. And once growth begins to slow, the profits of all ad-supported platforms depend on reducing the cost of content. Creative platforms fiercely deny this, of course. They position themselves as a community of supportive creators. However, if you read what they're telling their advertisers, you'll see the truth laid out pretty clearly. You are a means to an end, and you will be cut out of that loop as soon as a cheaper means to that end can be identified. And right now, generative AI looks like those means. Another way to know when people are interested in structure and affect rather than quality is when conversations focus on fitness for purpose. When people are looking for background music for a waiting room, Amazon product descriptions, or a header image for a social media post, they're clearly not engaging in terms of quality. If it has the right structure and affect, then it's good enough to get the job done. Anything more is a waste of money. And AI is utterly dominating these areas already. Actually, you can see this on Spotify as well. There are lots of playlists like music for concentration, or jazz for relaxation, or classical for better sleep. Users who click through those playlists don't want to engage in terms of quality. They just want to hear a few minutes of something with a structure and affect of relaxing jazz. Nothing more. AI-generated music is perfect for this. No one but the jazz lovers want to talk about quality, and they're not part of this transaction. But of course, these motivations have always been there. For the most part, all the buyers of commercial art have ever wanted was the structure and affect. They have always just wanted content. Quality has always been irrelevant to them. In the past, however, the only way to get that content was to hire actual artists. And a lot of those artists brought their A game. Not because they were going to get paid anymore, but because that's just what artists do. And that's how we got those amazing travel posters from the 20s and 30s, and Schoolhouse Rock from the 70s, and even Toulouse-Lautrec's Moulin Rouge posters from the 1890s. Neither the buyers nor the consumers demanded that level of quality. The institutions paying for it were not trying to create art that would endure for generations. No, they just wanted the content. But since they needed an artist to create it, the entire world got a lot of inspiring and enduring art as part of the bargain. The great commercial art of the past was created not because artists were better than, but because technology was worse. Generative AI lets the buyers get the content without you. So don't play their game. Second, connect with your fans on your terms. For musicians, one obvious way to do this is live performance. Musicians have been making money from live performance for the past 4,000 years, so it's a pretty well-proven model. I know it's hard right now. Far fewer venues support live music today than they did in the past, and fewer still pay for it. And even if you turn pro, record labels are keeping more and more of the tour revenues for themselves. But live performance is worth cultivating, even if it needs to take a different commercial form in the future. The global phenomena of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour shows that we still want to and still need to connect with live music today just as much as we have for thousands of years. It's a deep part of who we are. Connecting online is critical but tricky. The creative platforms are incredible tools, and you need to be using them. But you need to stay skeptical of the marketing bullshit that is coming from companies promising to help you connect with your fans, only to squeeze you out once you have generated enough content and AI training data for them. When in doubt, take a look at how they talk to their advertisers. If the focus is on content and structure and affect, then at least you know what you're getting into. There's one big exception to this rule. Getting onto a platform like YouTube, TikTok, or Spotify early, before the structure and affect gets locked down, can be a fantastic creative opportunity. The early days of YouTube, Etsy, podcasting, and really the internet in general was a glorious time of creative experimentation. No one was sure what the structure and affect was supposed to be, so the only way to engage with what was being created was through its quality. But once structure and affects start to get locked in, things begin to change. So by all means, use YouTube, TikTok, and similar platforms. I mean, you're listening to me on a podcast, right? I'm clearly a fan of these platforms. Just don't count on them to make money. And don't listen to their feedback on how to create better art. They will just lock you in more tightly to their preferred structure and affect. It's also worth mentioning that there are a handful of companies who've structured their business models so that users are incentivized to engage with creative works in terms of quality. Substack, Patreon, and Nebula fall into this category. Since their core business models incentivize deeper connection with specific creators rather than casual content consumption, the odds are more in your favor. At least their interests are aligned with yours, and, that's a good place to start. Third, learn how to spot where structure and affect have been locked in and then subvert it. You have an edge here. Meaningful subversion of structure and affect is something that large language models simply cannot do. It goes against the very nature of what they are and how they're architected. And more important, society really needs you to start subverting structure and affect. It's the only way we're going to break out of this cultural slump we seem to be stuck in. Subversion of structure and affect is actually an age-old creative technique. Satire is based on this subversion. Whether it's The Daily Show subverting the structure and affect of a news show to comment on the news and our relationship to it, or Blazing Saddles subverting the Western film to talk about racism. This is true in music as well. John Cage wrote pieces like 433 and As Slow as Possible that subverted both structure and affect to such a degree that listeners were forced to ask themselves, is this really music? And punk rock kept the structure and subverted the affect to such a degree that my father's generation emphatically insisted that no, this is not music. But that's art. That's progress. Subverting structure and affect forces people to either ignore you or to engage with you in terms of quality. It's a way to make quality matter. It's always simpler to give people what they expect and what they think they want, but AI will soon be able to do that better than you can. Seek out places where structure and affect have started to settle in and then subvert it by doing something different. And to the musicians out there, for God's sake, please create something that your peers consider visionary and that old-timers like me absolutely hate. Please, our cultural future depends on it. And finally, I've got a big favor to ask of all the music, book, podcast, and movie lovers out there. You have an important role to play here. Just as the whole world benefits from the creative output of a small number of artists, it also benefits from a relatively small number of enthusiasts who may not be artists themselves, but who know what they like and can explain why they like it. Most people don't take the time to consciously look beyond the structure and affect and to deeply engage with quality, but subconsciously, most of us can tell the difference. This is why quality art endures for decades or centuries, sometimes only being rediscovered years after the creator's death. And this is why low-quality creative works, even those that are global sensations, quickly fade from the culture. It is the enthusiast's ongoing engagement with quality that makes that happen. So the favor I ask of you is become a music critic. Now, I do not mean that you should adopt the structure and affect of being a critic. You don't need to wear a tweed jacket and glasses or smoke a pipe, but you need to engage with quality, know what you like and why, and be willing to tell the people in real life around you about it. I'm also not saying that you should start listening to opera or jazz or visiting art museums, although, there is some pretty cool things to be discovered there. But no, keep watching, reading, and listening to what you do now, but engage with the quality. Now, you'll find that this is a lot harder than it sounds. Engaging with a creative work in terms of structure and affect can be done in seconds. Engaging in terms of quality takes time. You'll be forcing yourself to consume fewer creative works, and that can be hard in our binge-watching culture. Carve out some time to just listen to the music you love. When you watch a movie, let the CGI and witty banter just wash over you, and see if the human story itself resonates with you. What moves you? Why? There are no wrong answers. Now, there are two things you'll discover pretty quickly. First, your second screen is your enemy. Scrolling social media while listening to music or watching a movie will cause you to disengage and overlook a lot of the quality that can make a work great. And no, science has repeatedly proven that we can't actually multitask this way. Second, you'll discover that most books, movies, and music are simply not worth you spending this kind of time on. So turn them off and keep looking. When you find something that moves you, share it with the people around you, in real life, not just the internet, and tell people why you like it, and ask them to share with you. You see, this is how discovery actually works. One of the biggest disappointments in music streaming has been their promises of music discovery. The claim was that with millions of tracks from thousands of artists with uncountable numbers of global influences, we would discover all kinds of new and exciting music. But that never happened. From junior high school forward, I've discovered far more new music by talking with people in real life than I ever have on these so-called discovery platforms like Spotify or iTunes. Sure, Spotify feeds me playlist after playlist of new tracks and new artists, but it's the same music, the same structure, the same affect. I think the problem stems from the fact that when streaming services gave us instant access to musicians from all over the world, they also gave those musicians access to a global audience. When you combine that with an algorithm that instantly rewards and punishes based on engagement, well, a race to optimize structure and affect is the natural result. Maybe innovative new styles need to develop in isolation, emerging and getting refined among like-minded visionaries and supported by just a handful of fans and enthusiasts who really get it. Society needs that handful of enthusiasts to engage with artistic works in terms of quality. They are the ones who not only bring innovative creative works to the attention of the rest of us, but just as importantly, they are the ones who determine which works endure. AI is here to stay, and it will dominate every market focused on structure and affect. So to survive as an artist, you need to make sure that you're playing a different game. As an epilogue, there's been a lot of discussion about whether AI can defy structure and affect and create real art. LLMs will not. That's just not how they're architected. They are structure and affect imitation machines. But long before we reach anything close to AGI, AI will evolve to the point where it has intention, where it can travel the net, interact with the world, and build up its own private experiences. With so much information comprising this rudimentary consciousness, I can absolutely see AI developing the desire or even the compulsion to create art. Of course, we might not be able to understand such art. It would most likely have a structure and affect that we won't even recognize at first. But the AIs would not be producing it for us. They would be producing it for each other, or perhaps just for themselves. If you want to talk about AI and creativity, I would love to talk to you. In fact, I've taken my own advice and shared some links to thinkers on this topic that are worth engaging with deeply. So come by Disrupting Japan /show 226 and let's talk about it. And this is a special episode to me, so please share online or just tell people about it. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups and VCs know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.